Alright, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to what I'm very excited for today. We have a TVT, but it's not just any regular TVT. It's first I'll introduce the players here, and then we'll get into why this is going to be so interesting. In the top left-hand corner, from Team Liquid, it's the young Frenchman himself. It's Clem. And in the bottom right, from Shopify Rebellion, one of the most loved players in the world. It's Byun. I mean, you could say that about any, I think, of the top players in StarCraft too. You know, of course, Sarah, Maru. But Byun especially has definitely a very large fan base for good reason. Now, why am I excited about this series? Well, ladies and gentlemen, if you look down at the bottom left-hand corner, you see there, what is that? This is not a ladder map. This is Team Liquid map contests. Yes, that is right. We got some replays from WardiTV's Team Liquid map contest tournament. And so we're going to get a little bit of sneak peek. I haven't seen any of these. I was not able to catch this tournament, so I'm so excited as we're on to Sunforge for our first map of today. And in this TVT, it's definitely going to be very interesting to see how this map plays out. Now, Sunforge, did a quick look at it beforehand. As you can see, seems to be a fairly standard layout. You have, of course, the low ground into the natural base, which does mean that, hey, this map, you're probably going to be, especially in TVT, it's a map that's going to be very easy to push with early game attacks. We already see Clem here going for the kind of proxy second barracks, and this is a build that you actually see players like Maru even do, although Maru does do it with the one gas into the fast natural CC sometimes. In this case, you of course want to get that second gas out faster. You want that factory as quick as possible because, as I said, that no ramp into the natural means that it's a lot easier for the Terran to set up an attack than before. Now, on this map, you have both of your third bases on the low ground, and actually quite a decent walk away from this kind of main central area that connects all these bases, as Byun is sending his first Reaper across the map, and this actually might get messy very quickly. Now, don't usually see this. Byun should scout the fact that there's no natural CC, see only the single barracks, and that should clue him in that something is up, as two Reapers and an SCV are across the map here for Clem. Already going to be a little bit of trouble here for our South Korean Terran. He's going to have to pull on back with his Reaper. Good KD8 charge to keep Clem away. More Reapers coming across the map. The Hellion will pop out soon, though. That should be a cancel there on the command center. I don't think there's any saving that. Byun, you need to cancel. Byun! Oh, no! I don't think Byun canceled. That is massive, as Byun is going to dive on in. I mean, gets a few of the Reapers, but loses quite a lot. He's going to get chased on down now. Another Reaper going to pop out. Should be able to stop Clem from pursuing this any further, but that hurt. As Byun laughs out loud, obviously recognizes the fact that that was a big mistake. Of course, wanted to bait in Clem, and that was the idea. Hey, I'm going to bait Clem in. I'm going to make sure that his Reapers have to stay as, well, it looks like Clem's going to bait him. Types out the sad face and still manages to get the kill onto the Hellion. Starports are coming through now for both of these players, but look at that, Clem. He's got the command center. Byun, where's your command center? You don't have one. Oh, my Terran heart. But there is a tank already on the way for Byun, and he's working on a medevac. So this response from the Shopify Rebellion Terran is not to try and immediately get back up a natural command center and immediately recover. He's transitioning his build into something that's very natural, which is going to be, okay, medevac, tank drop, apply some pressure. Byun kind of recognized the fact that that's going to be how he's going to try and leverage his position in this game, especially with Clem going for the proxy. You know that this was a proxy second barracks as Byun. So you can recognize the fact that, hey, listen, I'm going to have an advantage in my tech. And we see that right now. You just have the add-ons coming through for Clem. It's a tech lab on both the factory and the starport. Nothing's going to be out really in substantial numbers before Byun has more, essentially. The first tank is in production for Clem, but at this point you will have, you know, Byun sitting fairly pretty with a good amount, you know, a tank, Marines, and a Cyclone with that medevac, and also working on a Banshee to help with this push. As two Reapers have made their way into the main, they snuck all the way around this map And it looks like as this game goes on, we'll have a little bit of a chance to delve a little bit deeper into the map layout as more SCVs going down. Actually, 4 in total have fallen. Byun is getting so much work done with just 2 Reapers. And, I mean, this is where you should have something at home if you are Clem. 8 SCVs in total. That is ridiculous. And, I mean, that completely offsets the loss of a command center for Byun. 9 SCVs have died, but as this first medevac is going to find its way out, we can look a little bit more at the map, as you do actually have what you would think would be actually be high ground from, you know, in the center of the map is actually low ground in this map. And so that does make for an interesting kind of situation where later in the game, if you're trying to push your opponent, you can set up bastions right around all this high ground, and it's very hard to push it. So I would be interested to see a late game TVT here, as the Banshee will be scouted, but the Banshee will also scale all the units moving out. Byun has a very nice setup, 2 tanks at home, Cyclone and Marines. I don't think there's much that Clem is going to be able to do to push this, especially when your army is pretty much Reapers, Hellions, and a tank, as Byun has found his way into the main base with the drop. Also will have the Banshee going towards the natural, and now Clem is forced into a position where suddenly he is going to have to force this fight, or at least do something. And there we go, he's going to go on in, but 2 tanks firing away. The Raven should only be able to disable 1, gets the tank on the high ground, which is a smart choice. But another Banshee is out, and this Banshee with the SCV pull should be able to just absolutely crush through. This is back at home. The Banshee is wreaking havoc on the natural base. The Marines have been cleaned up, but the tank goes down at the front, and Byun is able to completely crush that attack. As Cloak is now done for this Banshee, and that just means that, well, this gets a little bit more annoying for Clem, who has lost so many workers already. 22 SCVs have gone down. Byun with the focus fire knows that it's just the singular Viking. Gets out of scan range. GG, Byun takes game 1. To quickly talk about that last game, just before we get into this map that we're on now, Cryogenian, oh my. What you saw there was really interesting because it was a situation of, oh, well, Byun forgets to cancel his command center. That is absolutely huge. But because Clem committed the double gas, because Clem committed so many Reapers, it ended up being really altogether not that big of a loss with the advantage that Byun was going to have with his tech. And so that meant that altogether the game was pretty even, and then as soon as Byun got the SCV kills, that was really kind of the kicker. As looking at the map layout, you will notice a few interesting things. Cryogenian, much like a map like Blackbird, does have bases that are cut off by rocks. They are still more easily accessible. You can destroy these rocks, this terrain, to get to these bases. Now, the one at the top is actually, you can see here, it's only one way. So one player will naturally be expanding down towards this location. And that kind of naturally leads you to an expand path that splits the map horizontally, which is interesting. But it can also lead to games where, hey, you want to expand upwards, because if you get control of this middle base and you get a setup, suddenly you have this position right here where your opponent has to push over this, and your opponent has to push through these choke points. And then when you're expanding upwards, you have these rocks to defend yourself. It's a map that I think is going to have a lot of really interesting kind of options for what you want to do as Clem. I think he also thinks this is a 4-player map. But it's not. It is 2 players. As command centers are going down now, interestingly enough. His map also no ramp into the natural, but Byun did decide to go for that fast natural CC. It's really an option that I think you can go for because you have this ramp that's not directly at the natural, but it's close enough that it's easy to defend if your opponent decides to go for anything aggressive. And we're actually seeing 2 aliens at a time being produced here for Byun. So immediately swaps off that reactor, which you usually you'd use for double Reaper production, gets a tech lab onto the barracks, and I'm interested to see where this goes. If it is just going to be, oh, it's not even going to be a medevac. Is this going to be Banshees? It's going to be Banshees and Hellions, I think, from Byun, which is such an interesting idea. Might still get a medevac as he's researching Cloak. No, it's a Raven. What? Okay, my mind is blown. I was so sure that this was going to be some sort of aggression, like really not committed aggression, but harassment from Byun using, you know, some sort of 2-pronged attack, but that is not the case. Instead, it's just going to be the Raven. Can use that, of course, for the harassment, but is not going to be anything too crazy, like, you know, a medevac into Cloaked Banshees with going for Hellion drops. As we full final stat swap over back onto the barracks so you can get Marine production and tank production can start for Byun, who now has a whole lot of Hellions, and those can, of course, move across the map. Now, I'm not sure about the map, or the math on it, but 6 Hellions versus 5 Marines and 2 Hellions, I think you do pretty good as Byun in this location, in this situation, if you are trying to push out. Now, that doesn't seem to be the case. This is just a very strong defensive force for any amount of Reapers that want to push across the map, and it will give him the option of now moving out, as he knows that there's going to be no aggression from his opponent. Now, Cryogenia does have 2 Xel'Naga Watchtowers, which is, of course, you know, nice for controlling the center of the map. It will just barely, I believe, not get you vision of these bottom and top bases, but full control of the middle of the map and where your opponent is moving is given over. As here we go, Byun going to find his way on in. First Hellion gets sniped, and now the Raven auto turret harass into the main base at the same time. Ooh, Clem. Very good with mirroring the movement of his opponent as, ooh, Byun's going to dive on in here. Isn't managing to altogether to get that much value, loses a lot of the Hellions. Roasts up some Marines, but together, not going to be the most worthwhile endeavor. Another auto turret going to go down. Manages to snipe another worker, and that should be about all the value you're going to get from it, as that timer will run out. But Byun is going to be behind on his third base timing, actually. Clem going for the standard macro build. Barracks, factory, starport, Marines, tanks, Ravens, and at the same time, or of course, Cyclone first into the tanks, and then you get out that faster third CC because, well, you're really not producing a ton of mineral-intensive units. It's really focusing on balancing your gas and mineral income. And so he will have that faster third command center. Of course, is going to be building it inside of his main base for safety, so by the time it finishes morphing, the timing will about be equivalent for Byun, who is going to be moving out onto the map. Has 3 Ravens now. Of course, the Raven energy for him is slightly lower, which is going to be a worry if you are the player that's attacking. And that's kind of what you concede when you try and go for Raven harass, is that you're not going to have that energy for later on. You're not going to have the interference matrices. Although, if Clem moves out here, Hellion does manage to absorb the tank shot. Sorry about that. Immediately interference matrix. It's not onto the tank, though. Auto turrets go down. And it looks like Byun is starting to lose this fight. I mean, almost looked like he could pull it out, but there's just so many more tanks for Clem. Manages to snipe 2, though. And somehow makes that fight worth it. I mean, it was 3 tanks versus 1. 3 Ravens versus 3. Byun does end up, you know, getting the worst end on the Raven trade, but still manages to snipe 2 tanks. That means that Clem can't really push out. You know, considering that Clem did have the earlier tank production, losing that fight is actually incredible. I don't think there was any focus fire from Clem on Byun's units until it was too late because the auto turrets were being focused by the tank fire. That's just not exactly what you want. As +1/+1 has started up for Byun. Clem, does he have... There we go, okay. I was going to say, should have his engineering base done as well, so he won't be too far behind on those upgrades. As the big difference here is going to be the stim pack timing, of course. When you get out earlier barracks as Byun, you are just going to have the advantage there in your stim timing, immediately getting into the combat shields as well, and up to 5 racks for our Terran player on 3 bases. Both players sitting at a very healthy worker count. 65 for Byun is already 6 workers ahead of Clem. And again, not a lot of reason for that. There was the 4 workers killed by the auto turret harass, but even then Byun has just been faster with his worker production, has just been, I think, kind of gradually extending his lead just by slight increments. As we see, the armory is completed first for Byun, so he's actually going to be getting a very, very quick +1 vehicle weapons for his tanks as Vikings for both players out on the map. And I love how these players are adapting to this map. Ow, this is so cool. Because there's so little airspace, you just using a supply depot on the side where your main base will be. Groups of Marines being moved out to get control of the center of the map. Looks like Byun is going to win that trade. Some very nice focus fire. The benefit of focus firing 1 Marine at a time shown wide and clear. And Byun has complete control of the middle of the map. Knows exactly where everything is and knows where his opponent is moving. The only position that he's not really sure about is here. This bottom side that leads directly to the third of his opponent. But mind you, that's a position that he can push if he so desires. +1 vehicle weapons on the way for Byun. Should be able to start up his 2-2 very shortly as well. As he's taking a 4th base on location, it feels like Byun right now is just hitting all of the macro strides that he needs to. And I mean, this is really interesting to see because, you know, of the players that I think we critique the TVD as, never mind, we're just having a fight. Why is Clem here? He's trying to fight this. This is not what you need to do, Clem. Moves out, I mean, half of his army, I think. There's still 3 tanks at home. Thought he could try and collapse onto the Marines, but Byun was right there, and that was just an awful position for Clem. But as I was going to say, you know, of the Terrans that I think people critique the most for their, you know, for not having as good of a matchup in the mirror matchup as their others, Byun and Clem are those 2 players. You know, I think constantly their TVT has been under scrutiny for not being up to the same par as something like their TVZ or TVP. But right now we are seeing, I mean, I think Byun just having the step up in this matchup. I mean, look at the upgrade timings. +1/+1 for his tanks is on the way already. Has a 4th base on location. Is just kind of taking advantage of what he's given. Clem is giving over a lot of pressure, a lot of space, a lot of time for Byun to do what he wants. And Byun is taking full advantage of that as the base goes down. And while Byun's already there, there's no units in position for Clem to defend. It's 7 tanks to 4. The Viking lead is for Byun as well. He's just ahead in almost every facet in this game aside from Raven count. And that's really not that useful right now as the Vikings are going to move on forward. The tanks do get interference matrix, but it's not going to help out too much. Some good shots from Clem as now the drop is going into that 3rd base of Byun. Immediately the rally going to come on out. Clem have to pick on up, get on into the main base as he's being pushed at the front. And look at the supplies now, 180 to 140. Clem on the ropes here as Byun is trying to push him down. Another scan is going to follow. But Byun not pushing the position, loses 13 workers at home, but he's, I mean, honestly, you're happy with that. You know you're on 4 bases. Byun just moves forward, snipes the Vikings, and knows he can maintain air superiority as the Vikings go, or as the medevacs go down for Clem. And now it's 194 supply to 142. Byun stimming forward, sees the tanks on siege, but can't commit in just yet. But look at how many more units Byun has. Oh, Byun. Not going to stem it forward just yet. GG's going to be called, though. Clem realizes that it is a frugal fight. I don't know the word. GG. And Aftermath. What an interesting map we have here. This map makes me excited, is what this map does, because it has a lot of interesting ideas. Now, it is a very large map. If you're looking at it, this map, kind of huge. It very reminiscent, I would say, of the shape of Blackburn from the current map pool. It just kind of flipped on its head and expanded to a few additional bases. You are still going to have a gold base, as you see that Blackburn shape, kind of in the first 4 or 5. But then you split what was the 7th base for either player into 2. So on either side, you are going to have a base. And interestingly enough, you have an acceleration zone on a base. That's cool as fuck. That's so cool. That is the coolest thing I've ever seen. So I'm excited to see how this map plays out. I'm really excited if this map does make it into the map pool, or if I get to see longer games on it in the replays that we have from this tournament, how this plays out in the long run. Because you have these 2 bases very close, a mineral wall, you know, debris that you can destroy. This whole kind of middle of the map is very heavy with choke points, but it can be opened up and can create very interesting situations. I mean, you also have this low ground kind of death trap in the center of the map here. And it's such an interesting layout, the rocks, the gold base, all of it. And kind of just so cool. And I'm excited to see how the players do take advantage of it. As we have Byun once again, going to be going for that single gas opening, not really worrying about getting his tech out too quickly. And this is something that, again, we've seen in all 3 games where Clem is getting out the faster factory. He's getting out, you know, more Reapers and Hellions. And in the end, is it really serving him altogether that well? Because Byun is just making smarter moves as the game goes on. You're seeing Byun I think especially in that last game, just his movement around the Zelnaga watchtowers. You know, he understood that he had control of those positions, and so he has his army on the map. He's able to respond when Clem tries to move out a larger force to clear out one of the towers, is able to win the fight there. And then eventually when he just finds a position where he's able to stop the 4th base from landing, immediately siege up with more tanks after winning that fight at the Zelnaga watchtower, and he's able to continually push that advantage. And I think that's what these kind of games have come down to, is Byun gets these small leads, and then, you know, Clem isn't really able to fight back, isn't really able to hold on in the game to the point where that lead that Byun had doesn't matter anymore. And that's something that you can do over time in TVT. We see players like Maru do it all the time, where even if they get behind, they just draw the game out. They make, you know, just take as good fights as they can, focus on their upgrades, focus on just all the timings that they can, and they get back into the game, because that small advantage, well, over time, it becomes less and less important. Now, Clem is moving out with his Reapers and Hellions here, and this is a bit dangerous, because Byun has once again gone for the double Hellion production off the reactor, and if you push up this ramp, well, that could be very bad, as Byun's immediately going to dive on top, and all the Reapers are dead. And that's exactly why Byun goes for this kind of opening build order, is if Clem does push out, well, look at that. Suddenly you're able to completely win that fight. The Reapers get one shot by 4 Hellions, essentially. And now suddenly you're seeing Clem having to pull back to his natural base, but what does he have to defend this? Well, the Cyclone isn't out just yet, and it's still going to be 4, now 6 Hellions trying to push on in. Clem, I mean, Cyclone's almost out, but it's not out quite yet. The Focus Fire will come down from Byun, as he isn't really worrying about splitting his units or trying to get the best shots he can. He knows he'll just win the engagement. 4 SCVs will go down, able to snipe the Hellion of Clem. Gets out still with a few units of his own, and now we have a Raven moving on in for some harassment. Interestingly enough, it is a Banshee that is on the way for Clem, but, I mean, that Banshee doesn't really matter. You have Ravens out for Byun. Already 6 SCVs have gone down in this early game. Well, this is quite disastrous. Because mind you, Clem's going for the safe opening. Clem's going a build that, in all reality, should not take this much damage early on, because you have faster tech. You have the faster factory. You have the faster starport. And still, he's taking 7 workers of damage. And still, you know, he's losing a lot of his early game units. And suddenly that means that, well, Byun's not really worried about, you know, about not having units because of his opening. Now, this faster natural command center will just actually continue to expand Byun's lead, whereas before, you know, where usually it feels like something that you have to defend. But because, I mean, and this, I think this has a lot to do with the map. I mean, Aftermath being such a large map, you're not really worried as much about those counterattacks and early aggression from your opponent, because it's such a long rush distance from base to base, as we're going to see that auto turret. And you get a few more SCV kills. Focus Fire doesn't go down onto the SCV, as the Banshee has made its way into the base, and no cloak for it means that the Cyclone will be able to chase it down. The scan will be invested, and that should be the kill. And that just hurts even more for Clem. Again, you're just constantly losing things in this early game, and there's nothing you can do to take advantage of the fact that you have more tanks right now. You know, because you don't even really actually have more Ravens even. Byun, because Clem went for 1 Raven into a Banshee, Byun has 3 Ravens. Byun, his stim pack isn't delayed from Clem's, and so any advantage that Clem might have had with the rush distance of the map, with everything that has happened, is now just completely negated from this double gas opening that he went. And it just feels like Byun right now is in a commanding position. I mean, 92, your 14's 24 supply up 6 minutes into this game. That is an incredibly large lead. And Byun already has his 3rd base on location. Clem does not have a 3rd CC building right now. That's how far ahead Byun is. That is... I don't mean to sound like I'm calling the game before it happens, but really, I mean, the map didn't even have any, isn't going to have any part to play in this game. Sure, it did for, you know, the size of it, and Byun taking advantage of that with his opening, with the Hellions, and taking advantage of the air units. And I think that's Byun just reading the map correctly, that he can go for that opening, and it's an opening that you don't really see in TVT. But aside from that, the map is not going to have much to play in this game because Byun is at this point, sure, an army not that far ahead. He's actually behind an army because of Clem's opening, but he is so far ahead economically in terms of his 1/1 upgrade timing. Clem not even having started his +1 armor. Raven count, just there's so many leads here for Byun that extend beyond that army supply. And for Clem, I mean, what are you gonna do? You just don't have a third command center. You're continually building units. You're trying to respond to these auto turrets, and they're still getting like 4 SCVs killed at a time. And this Raven is still alive. 9 kills on it already. 5 kills on the other Raven, and that's all in workers. So far, a very one-sided game. Almost 1,000 more minerals lost for Clem. And he's going to look to now mine out this mineral wall. You can do it with a singular mule. I believe you might need a second to fit your tanks through, though. Tanks are loaded up. I mean, there's the sensor tower. Do you go around the sensor tower with the medevacs into the main base? No, because Byun's already ready for that. But we'll see if he can push on towards this third base. The tanks are getting sieged on up, but Byun is already here. Interference matrixes on everything. And for Clem, that is it. GG, Byun. A swift 3-0.